Welcome all to the first of a podcast series by the ACNR Journal on the occasion of its 20th anniversary. I'm Srikirti Kodali, a Neurology Registrar from East of England, and today I'm in conversation with two effervescent and important personalities for the journal, Rachael Hansford, the publisher, and Professor Barker, the founding editor. Rachael's vision for a free publication for specialists in neurosciences met with the enthusiasm of a young consultant neurologist, Roger, based at Cambridge in the year 2000. Join us on hearing the 2-decade journey and story of the ACNR Journal through these pioneers. Hello, Roger.
Hello.
And Rachael.
Hello, Shri. Hello, Rachael.
How's everyone doing?
Really good, thank you.
Yeah, very happy.
Very happy, excellent. In the midst of a pandemic.
Yep, couldn't be better.
So, welcome to Neurovoices. It's the first of a ACNR podcast series, and we're doing this as a 20th anniversary project through ACNR, and it was Rachael's idea. Thanks very much, Rachael, for inviting me to be the host for this.
Thank you
series.
for agreeing.
And so Roger's a very special person for the ACNR. And I thought I'd like to ask Rachael you the first question of how ACNR started. You told me about a little office in Edinburgh.
Yeah, that's right. I was working for a medical publisher in Edinburgh at the time on a cardiology publication. But I've got a sibling, my older brother, who had at that point had two very serious brain injuries, and I started thinking about what I could do if I was to do my own publication. So I came up with the idea of doing a neurology one, and so I just started investigating it from there. I'm not very good at being told what to do, so I wanted to work for myself.
So you used to work for a medical journal?
It was a very small family publisher in Edinburgh, yes, and they did journals that were in the same kind of format as ACNR, or magazines as they were. It wasn't sort of peer-reviewed articles. So I started thinking and asking questions of people, and I think I told you about how it was rather random that I was put in touch with Stephen Kirker because one of my colleagues on another medical journal happened to share a flight home to Ireland with him. And when I mentioned to her that I had this idea for a neurology journal, she said, "Oh, I met this neuro rehab chap on a flight. I'll put you in touch with him." So Steve Kirker was the link, wasn't he? So, and then he suggested Roger. He recommended Roger as being this young, up-and-coming, bright spark. And I think I emailed you from my office in Edinburgh while I was at work. Yeah. Probably shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
And I think I remember having a response in about 20 minutes and nearly falling off my chair. And you suggested coming down for a meeting. So that was it. You know, it was all sort of, oh, it's actually happening.
Yeah, and then I remember getting very panicky because we had a discussion about it, and I said, well, this sounds like an excellent idea. Let's get on with it. And then I think you sent me an email and said, no, I've chucked in my job. I'm ready to start on this. And I thought, a minute.
Oh, my God.
I thought this was just something we were doing as a bit of a jolly in our spare time. I didn't realise it was going to be Rachel's main source of income. And I remember this was a great anxiety for myself and
oh, really?
Alistair
you hid
Coles,
it very well.
When he joined early on, because we were very worried that for us it was just something that we very much enjoyed doing and working with Rachael, but we were acutely aware of the fact that this was going to have to, pay for the food on the table.
Yeah.
And was it actually financially viable, this as a prospect?
See, it's funny because I was very anxious as well, but for different reasons, because I was anxious about whether I'd make any money, but I knew that I could just go and get a job if I needed to. I remember talking to you about it in your office, and you asking me towards the end of the meeting, what publishing house are you with? After you'd expressed an interest in doing it, and we'd kind of agreed we were going to do it, and you said, what publishing house are you with? And I thought, I now have to break it to him that there actually isn't one. It's just me, this kind of complete random stranger that's rocked up and, with no background in neurology, didn't know anything about it. And I did sort of wonder whether, I thought, I've dragged these people into it, I've made them agree to do it, and what if it all goes wrong? I felt like I put your name on the line. That was my concern. I wasn't really worried about
well, I never worry about that, and certainly 20 years ago I had no name at all, so it was a very easy thing to agree
okay, well,
to do, and it was perfect, in fact, because one of the things I love is being able to do things with a small team, which is slightly not non-establishment, but it's a rather unique operation, which gives you the freedom to do what you want. And if you had been part of a big publishing house, then it would have been a big saga trying to get all this sorted out. There would have been particular processes and protocols and people you'd have to get involved with. And it wouldn't have had the freedom and the flexibility and the uniqueness, I think, which the journal had. And what I always loved about it, and always have loved about it, is whatever you want to do, you just do it.
Yeah.
So I remember in the early days, someone actually wrote a letter to object about something we'd written, saying, they didn't believe in what we wrote. I said, okay, we'll just write another article against that then. I don't have to worry about some great editorial board or running it past the company. We just get on with it. Yeah,
I know. I'd feel the same too, really. As I said at the start, I don't like being told what to do. So it was, for us, it was just a case of, we like the idea of that. We'd have chats a bit like this, and let's do this. Oh yeah, great idea. We'll do that. Yeah. And so we would just do it. Invite, I think we talked to you about some of the people that we invited to write and got big names to write for us, didn't we? And I had no fear because I didn't know who any of these people were, so I wasn't in awe of anyone.
Well, people were very generous early on. So we had people like Angela Vincent and Peter Gadsby and such like who were writing very early on for it, and of course the problem was it wasn't a recognised publication because it was entirely new. It wasn't on PubMed. It didn't really count towards your CV. But of course, these people didn't really need it for that. But it was very generous of them to write what were very good articles. And the whole essence of the journal, which of course these people very much subscribed to, was the idea that you bring science to neurologists and neurologists, the other way round. So that you have this sort of interaction. And therefore, articles have to be accessible from both sides of it. You have to, if you're a scientist, you need to understand neurology article, and if you're a neurologist, you have to understand the science. And therefore, they can't be very long. They don't have to be authoritative because they're only short, but they have to be engaging, accurate, and up to date. And people quite like that. And most people moan when you ask them to write things, but you say, well, if it's 1,500 words, you can knock that off in an hour if you know what you're talking about. So it's we were very fortunate in the early days that people signed up to it, and and there was nothing else that was there at the time.
You were talking about enthusiasm and just getting on with things, and I do remember sitting in your office that first day, and you were discussing what we would put in this journal, or this magazine as we were calling it then, and you just had a piece of A4 paper and put some columns on it and said, well, we could ask so and so and we'll do this and we'll do that. And I just looked at it and I thought, oh, okay, so that is actually the first issue. He's just planned it there, so we need to actually crack on and do it. But you literally did it. And then I said, well, what will we call it then? And you just reeled off the name, and that was it. Oh, okay. And you said call it ACNR for short.
Yeah, it was a bit. I remember discussing it with Anne Rosser. Actually, I was down in Cardiff discussing this whole idea, and I remember sitting in a kitchen over a cup of tea discussing this. And I think these sort of ideas came together around the title of it, and it's quite good because what you really wanted it to do. Well, the other reason we quite liked it was ACNR is very similar to lots of other very big journals, like American Journal of whatever, the American, so what would that be? ACNR, American what? I don't quite know what it is, but it's obviously an American journal, so it must be very important, very big. And so it sort of fitted in with the genre of journals which had those similar titles, really.
What else happened in that first meeting? So columns were drawn on a piece of paper, and you came up with a title. What was in the first issue?
Well, I would have to go back and check to what I remember, but I'm not entirely sure. I thought Angela Vincent wrote something on myasthenia gravis.
Write it here, I can tell you.
I thought Peter Gadsby may have written something on migraine, but that may have been in the second.
Yeah, we had Christopher Bowes, Manjit Matharu and Peter Gadsby, and Angela Vincent wrote. Mark Manford wrote his start of his management series on epilepsy. Alistair Coles wrote his anatomy primer in the first issue, and Stephen Kirker wrote the rehab article.
So it's a nice combination of lots of different things to do with neuroscience and neurology and rehab.
Yeah, I think it's always been a great passion of mine to as I say, to have short articles on things which are interesting, which are science, neurology, neuroanatomy, and of course having a vehicle by which to do it was terrific, really, because in those days there was a course that Alistair Compton ran, which was neuroscience for clinicians, which was very well attended during the 1990s. So Alistair set it up probably 89, 90, and I used to go along, and I thought it was absolutely terrific. And then it slowly disappeared because people weren't interested in it. I thought this was great sadness that people didn't want to do this. So this was a fantastic way by which to do it. So to be honest, of course, I was a younger man then, and with Rachel's enthusiasm, energy, you're a bit fearless, really, because at the end of the day, you think, well, we'll just go for it.
Yeah. And
this has always been my way, in the past, I've done even more ridiculous things where I've tried to persuade even more serious people to do things. I tried when I was a medical student to make a whole series with the BBC and almost managed to pull it off before they realised I was a medical student. But in the process of that, I'd asked Jonathan Miller, the late Jonathan Miller, whether he'd present it with me, but he was too busy. David Attenborough, got a very nice reply from him saying he was busy for the next 5 or 10 years. It wasn't really his thing. So I was very struck by the fact that actually you can be put off doing things for fear that you will fail and will anyone engage with it. So you think, well, just go for it. And it's just amazing how...
Yeah, that was always my feeling, was I didn't want to get to be, I would say 60, but that doesn't sound quite so old these days. But, I didn't want to get to be older and think, I could have done that. I didn't want to die wondering what would have happened if I'd tried.
Yeah. And we also wanted it to be, it had to have a unique place. And we also wanted the best people to write things. So one of the things I was slightly allergic to was there were lots of free circulars that go around, which has been one of the problems with the ACNR initially, was people just thought it was one of these free circulars, goes around, which is doesn't have anything of any great substance in it. And so what I didn't want was to read an article on migraine, with no disrespect to the authors, but somebody you've never heard of who's in a junior job somewhere in Britain, for example, and you sort of think, well, it's obviously a nice thing to have written, but I don't know why I should pay particular attention to it, apart from the fact they've done their homework, whereas someone who's a world-leading authority on it, it somehow gives it more clout. And so we were very keen to make sure that the journal slightly punched above its weight, and that it was regarded as a serious neurology, neuroscience, rehab journal, and not just another one which was a vehicle for all the companies to advertise their drugs. Interleaved between their adverts were a few articles, and that was quite a tension to begin with, because
we did have to negotiate that, didn't we?
We did, and also because Alistair and I were very keen. I remember, because Alistair joined very early on, we were very keen on just having the whole thing as articles. And then, of course, when we suddenly realised that it was Rachel's livelihood, you couldn't have a journal that had no advertising in it, because also you had to pay for it. So the fact you're not part of a publishing house, someone's got to pay for it to go on a publication run, and that, that's, I mean, it's not vast amounts of money, but it's clearly money, and you've got to find that from somewhere. So I don't know how that worked, Rachel. I don't know how we managed it, because it was through your contacts we got it.
Well, I mean, I built up a list before I started. I had ideas by looking at who was advertising at conferences and so on. So I just phoned people. I mean, I still remember making the first phone calls from my flat in Edinburgh. I had the tiniest little desk. It was about a metre wide, a corner of my dining room. And I remember picking up the phone, and I don't know if I should confess to this, but my hand was shaking because I was so scared, because I knew there was so much riding on it.
But the other very important thing you brought to it was the professional finish and the style of it.
Well,
so I mean, you can see from that very first issue, that and you have to remember at that stage, 20 years ago, that most journals, so like the JNMP, would just be a list of articles on the front. Brain used to have there was nothing that was aesthetically pleasing or attractive about any of those journals, and so making it attractive was an important thing, and that was another thing you had great expertise in, without diluting out the message, and also, as I was saying, getting it published to a very high spec without it costing a fortune.
Well, I think we were lucky that we were just on the cusp then. I was explaining this to Sri the other day about direct from PDF printing. It was just at the point where everything moved to doing everything digitally. So I was able to just, Donna, who did the original design for the journal and is still involved with it now and does the layout 20 years later, is vastly experienced, and so she would just organise it all and create the PDFs, and we sent it to the printer who was in Wales. That's and I still use that printer. And it was all done, and they posted it all out. I never saw it. I just had a few spare copies, came back to my tiny little flat in Edinburgh. And so I said to Sri, I really felt like the Wizard of Oz. It was really strange. I felt like I was in this tiny little desk behind a big curtain, pretending to be some big outfit. And if anyone pulled the curtain back, they'd have been absolutely horrified to just see me sitting there cowering in the corner.
Harry Potter and ACNR, you see?
Yeah,
very similar.
Exactly. There we go.
I mean, listening to this, you make it sound all very simple. So, Rachel, you had a strong motivation. You had the idea. Roger was involved. He started planning the content. Alistair Coles was then involved. You had someone for graphics. You found a publishing house. And is that all that's required?
I think at the time for what we did, because what we actually launched was a magazine, wasn't it? Not a journal in the sense nowadays, I think launching a medical journal is a different prospect. I mean, it was quite straightforward, wasn't it? You had. I don't think there was.
I mean, the big anxiety was. Would we get people to write for it? And you could call in favors for the first few issues. Not that I had anything particularly with Angela and Peter, but you could ask people you knew who were friendly towards you. So the worry was, could we sustain it? Could we get people interested? Because the other problem was we didn't want to put all this effort in if then people sort of say, well, I've never heard of this, and it was a problem. So there were various colleagues we had who would put it straight in the bin because it came in the packet. It was another one of those magazines. I get lots of those. So it was straightforward, and it, like everything, it's like when you start research. You all start research. You have a research question. You think, well, if I've answered that, what's my next one? Well, I don't have another one. That's it. I'm finished. And of course, the research then generates more questions, and so sustaining the journal was going to be one of the issues. Could we really come up with enough ideas to keep it topical, interesting? So there were anxieties about it, but to be honest, we didn't really worry about it because, as I say, apart from worrying about Rachel's livelihood, we sort of thought, well, we can take it wherever we want and do whatever we want with it. And there was a sort of spirit within the sort of neurology community. I mean, I'd only just become a consultant at that point. And there are a lot of us who just become consultants at that point. And so I think there was a sort of sense we can do lots of this stuff together and it's great fun. And so we were a bit sort of, didn't worry too much about what the establishment thought, and we weren't competing with anybody. So I didn't feel we were treading anyone's toes. So it was pretty straightforward because it was it worked very well because I knew nothing about publishing and still know nothing about publishing and that whole side of it. And Rachel didn't really know about the neurology community or the rehab community. So I could worry about what I was doing and I didn't have to do anything else. So, I mean, the only issues were it was quite a bit of work because obviously you had to chase all these people up, which Rachel did basically without us having to do it. But then you'd have to read all these articles and then you'd have to proofread them. And so it was quite a lot of work getting each issue done. And so that could get a bit stressy. I remember in those early days, you'd suddenly get the final PDF of the whole journal, which you then have to read in, 24, 48 hours to try and pick things up. But no, and because, as I say, it had no structure, if you like, it was wonderful. Let's do journal reviews. Okay, let's do journal. Let's do confident. Let's do confident reviews. Book
and
reviews.
Things haven't changed that much because now we go, let's do podcasts. Yes, great idea.
Over the last 20 years, how do you think the journal's evolved? Or is the main theme creativity?
Well, probably Rachel's the best one to answer that. I mean,
well, I don't know, because you were the editor for 10 years. I was going to say that earlier when you said about being worried about having ideas. You were a constant sort of barrage of ideas, is how I always remember it. Every year it would be like, well, right, what can we come up with? And you'd come up with a whole raft of other article ideas.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was always important to look to do other things. some of which worked and some didn't. So I was quite interested in art and neurology at one point. I got my son to write something because he was doing art, and it was very interesting. I was very interested in how neurological illnesses play out in art. But that never came off because he was pretty useless at writing any more articles, and nobody really engaged with that. So some things never. But it was always looking for other ideas. I mean, I'd made a decision that I wouldn't do it indefinitely because I think, as with everything. I think if you stay too long doing something, it sort of loses something, and it's important to hand it on. And also, 10 years ago, I took on the editorship of the Journal of Neurology, and I remember spending a lot of time agonising about that because Alistair Compston was very supportive of me taking on the Journal of Neurology, and I thought, would it compromise what I do with the ACNR? So it didn't. But after a year, I thought this is a sort of sign to hand it on to someone else, which is why I handed it on to Mike Zandi. So I think, part of the skill is getting it to evolve and to have that sort of sense of, moving with the times and changing, whilst also keeping its identity. So I think if I had moved on and completely pulled out of it, and Rachel had handed over to somebody else, I think there was a risk it would not be the same as it is now. And obviously the people so Mike is a bit like me and Alistair, and obviously has worked with myself, with Alistair and myself. So knows the type of style and had been involved with the journal prior to taking it over. So I mean, obviously I read it every time it comes out, and I look at it, and to me it's recognisable as the journal it was 20 years ago. When we started it, there was no such thing as an H index and such like. I mean, you needed visibility, which is what PubMed gives you, because you want to look something up, you just put it in PubMed, you find it, and then that would raise the profile of the journal. But actually, I mean, the impact of a journal isn't really measured so much now by whether you find it on PubMed, but how much it hits social media. And also, there's now a huge move in the research community to open access, so everything just gets dumped on him. So I suspect that the ACNR, will maintain its visibility and probably increase, because the nature of the articles are such that people just bung things in on Google now and find what they want.
Well, we have signed up with Crossref as well, and we're indexed in the DOAJ, so that only just happened at the end of last year, so that will hopefully make a difference.
But that was always the problem, was and Rachel had very clever ways of trying to assess this. How much visibility do we have? Because of course, if I came to you, Sri, 20 years ago and say, what do you think of the ACNR? And you say, the journalist I helped set up with Rachel, you'd go, oh yes, I love it, it's fantastic, it's really good, I read it every week. Because you're not going to say to me, what? Never heard of it. Was that the thing? It's absolute rubbish. So people, if you ask people who know you, they're only going to say things. So how do you find out the people who don't talk to you and don't know you, what they're doing with it? Whereas Graham Lennox was very straightforward. He said he just puts it straight in the bin because he didn't know there was anything in it.
Did he stop putting it in the bin after that? Please tell me that he stopped.
I'm pretty certain he did. Yeah, he at least took it out of his packet.
So you've had people like Oliver Sacks, Miller Fisher.
Yes.
Right, for the ACNR.
Yeah, that was great fun actually. We decided that we would try and get. So we had Alan Emery of Emery Dreyfus, right, to begin with, and then. Blanking on the chap who did central pontine myelin analysis. He's a very famous neuropathologist, and I asked him if he would write about central pontine myelinosis, and his opening paragraph, I remember, says, you could have asked me to write about, and then lists about 25 very classical neurological conditions which he had described, and then gives this excellent description of it. And I remember writing to him, Raymond Adams I think it was, and I said, could you do a series for us? He said something like, I'm 94. I don't subscribe to writing series at my age. But it was terrific. And that one by Miller Fisher, I shall never forget that article about how they actually described Miller Fisher syndrome simply through the contact. So yes, I mean, you could just write to these people and ask them. I mean, a bit as we were saying earlier, most people were very happy to contribute. I think in some ways they were also a bit puzzled. They had no idea quite who these people were and quite what this journal was, but they seemed very enthusiastic and they would accept anything. So
a barefaced cheek goes a long way through. That would be my advice.
Yeah, definitely. And Roger, for you, what were the highlights of the journal over the years, do you think?
I mean, I think the highlight for me was just filling a gap, really. I mean, it was something I'd always had a passion to do this. You know, my career has always been about trying to marry these two disciplines, which clearly seem to marry together. And I felt this was a way in which we could do it. So for me, the high points were that this was a vehicle by which you could do what you wanted to do. You could shape it and do whatever you wanted. And also, I think, you know, getting these great people to write their little stories. So the two things that really struck me over the years, one was those articles that you mentioned. The other were people's personal experiences. So people who had neurological type problems and then had written them up. And some of those were terribly moving and terribly impressive. So I think the other aspect of medicine, now I'm sounding very granddaddy, is about, you know, what it's like to live with something rather than just diagnose and treat it, and trying to understand what people go through. And you know, there were two cases in particular. One is a very lovely patient I have who wrote about her neuropathy, hereditary neuropathy, and how when she was very young with this, people thought she had some major problem. And in fact, you know, people, she was going to get married, and then they said, I can't marry you because, you know, because of this problem you've got. And the other was a lady I had who had herpes and looked like she was going to die with it in Edinburgh. And I treated her, and she made, to all intents and purposes, a complete recovery. But she couldn't recognize anybody. And she wrote this amazing account about, you know, going home in a car with someone who sounded familiar. She didn't know quite who they were, but she just knew she had to trust them. And then she had this story of where, you know, she would go and watch her son play football, and she knew it was her son because everybody else had walked off the field and he was the last one left. And so here was somebody who, to us, brilliant outcome. We'd done a terrific job. And of course, you know, in some ways we had, but she was left with this deficit, which was devastating. And so, you know, these aspects of people's stories I thought were real high point, and you didn't really see them anywhere else. And, you know, I was terribly grateful for the people who were so honest and writing about these accounts of their conditions and the sort of experiences they had. So I think it was those opportunities to hear the stories behind the syndromes, to hear the stories behind people's conditions, coupled to all the ideas that came through that were, for me, the real high point. And, you know, the fact it's still there 20 years on. I mean, that is a pretty amazing achievement.
And what was the wackiest idea?
I mean, to be honest with you, you know, the sort of wackiest ideas were expecting people to write, you know, these famous people to write accounts of their syndromes, really. I mean, because all of them were fairly senior in years, and all of them were probably pretty busy. So I think those were probably it. I mean, what we never wanted to do was end up adopting something that was a lot of work.
Yeah, that's right.
And going to be a bit not very rewarding, really, and take away from the fun of it.
Yeah,
I always viewed it as a bit like a sort of little commando unit. So things like Brain are, you know, a whole battalion. So they move very slowly, but they're very powerful. What we are is a little, you know, commando group coming, you know, flying low, deliver some, you know, stunning piece of action, and then off we go. And you can't catch us because you don't know where we're going to appear next with what.
And this commando unit marched on into the new century with some exceptional pieces from the wider neuroscience community and is ever hungry for new ideas. We hope you enjoyed listening to that. Certainly for me, it was insightful to learn the workings of a publishing house. However, I couldn't let go of Professor Barker yet. In the next podcast, I interview him on his journey from the very beginning to becoming a world-renowned academic neurologist. Thanks for listening, stay tuned, and goodbye.